Welcome to our channel. Today's story will make you think about how far you are willing to go to protect those you love. When your own child is drowning in suffering, and you can't save him, how far will you go for his well-being? Lisa did everything she could for her son, but can what's already been destroyed ever be restored? This is a story of pain, loss, and choices that determine the life of an entire family. Stay with us to hear it through to the end. My name is Lisa, and I am the mother of a 10-year-old boy named Tommy. Our son has been wheelchair-bound since birth. We knew that his life would be more difficult than other children's, but no one could prepare us for what is happening now. For the past 2 years, Tommy has been attending the same school, and every day has become a true test for him. It all started gradually, with small jokes and comments, but soon it grew into something bigger. Children started throwing trash at him, mocking his wheelchair, while teachers silently watched what was happening. Every day the situation worsened, and the school didn't seem to intend to take any action. They kept repeating the same thing: "We'll talk to the kids. We'll keep an eye on the situation," but nothing changed. Every time Tommy comes home from school, his face shows more pain and disappointment. He used to be a cheerful boy, dreaming of becoming a programmer and fascinated by video games. Now, every day he returns quiet, as if lost in himself, and only the tears on his cheeks reveal how hard it is for him. He no longer wants to play, he doesn't share his thoughts, and I feel how his young soul is slowly crumbling under the pressure of constant mockery and humiliation. For me, as a mother, it's unbearable. Seeing your own child suffer every day, realizing you can't protect him, that's the worst thing that can happen. I spoke to the teachers dozens of times, but every time I heard the same thing: "We'll do our best," and the only thing that changed were their words. Recently, I started looking for other schools where Tommy could feel safe. I found one, a bit farther than ours, about a half-hour drive away. This school offers a special program for children with disabilities, and I think he would be much better off there. Yes, it will mean extra effort on my part, long drives every day, but if it can ease my son's suffering even a little, I'm willing to do anything. However, the problem is not only at school, but also at home. When I shared my thoughts with my husband, Mark, he didn't support me. When I told Mark about my intention to transfer Tommy to another school, I expected support. I hoped he would understand that I wanted what's best for our son, but his reaction was completely different. He looked at me as if I had suggested something unthinkable. "Lisa, you can't just up and move him," he said, shaking his head. "That's not solving the problem. He has to learn to deal with difficulties, not run away from them." Those words felt like a stab in the back. I looked at my husband, not believing my ears. How could he say that, knowing what our son is going through? Every day, Tommy comes home broken, exhausted, mentally destroyed. And Mark thinks that's normal. "You don't understand," I began, trying to stay calm. "Tommy suffers every day. They bully him, throw things at him, laugh at his disability. This isn't just difficulties, Mark. This is bullying. And if the school can't protect him, we have to do something." But Mark just sighed and turned away. He had always been the kind of person who believed that life is a struggle and that no one would take care of us but ourselves. He had been through a lot in his life, and his philosophy was always that no one pities the weak. But this was about our son. Tommy isn't a grown man who can stand up for himself. He's just a child, and a disabled child at that. "Lisa," he said quietly, "the world won't be kind to him. We can't shield him from reality. In life, he'll face much bigger problems than these school bullies. He has to learn to be strong. If we move him to another school, we're only teaching him that he can run away from difficulties. And then what? Are you going to protect him forever? What happens when we're not around?" I felt anger rising inside me. Doesn't he understand? Tommy is only 10 years old. What kind of strength is he supposed to show? What reality? He already faces reality every day, and it's crushing him. And Mark wants him to just accept it. He's a child. I couldn't hold it in anymore. He doesn't have to be strong. He needs to be safe. And if the school can't provide that, we'll find a place where he'll be protected. Don't you see how much he's suffering? Every day he comes home. No, not even comes home, but arrives. And every time, he's a little less like the boy he used to be. Don't you see that?" Mark was silent. I knew he cared about Tommy, but his outlook on life was too harsh. We both wanted the best for our son, but we saw different ways of achieving it. And every conversation about this turned into a fight. "You're doing this out of fear, Lisa," he finally said. "You're making decisions based on emotions. I understand it's hard for you, but we have to think about the long term. He can't run from problems his whole life. We can't teach him that it's okay to run when things get tough." Those words stuck in my head. Run away. But we're not running away. We're trying to create a normal life for Tommy, where he won't be humiliated every day. I was sure I was doing the right thing, but now, after talking to Mark, I began to doubt. What if he's right? What if I am making decisions purely out of fear? Days passed one after another, and the tension between me and Mark only grew. Every time Tommy came home from school, the situation became harder. He no longer talked about his day, didn't share his thoughts as he used to. He would just silently roll his wheelchair into his room, close the door, and spend hours alone. Sometimes I would hear him playing video games, but even his favorite activities no longer brought him joy. Occasionally, I tried to go in and offer to talk, but Tommy refused. I saw how pain and despair were gradually consuming him, and it broke my heart. One evening, after Tommy had already gone to bed, I heard his quiet sobs. It was a sound impossible not to recognize, a quiet, suppressed cry. I pressed against his bedroom door, trying not to make a noise, and froze in place. My boy, my little Tommy, was crying alone in the dark, and there was nothing I could do to help him. I wanted to go in, hug him, comfort him, but I knew my words wouldn't fix what he felt every day at school. The next morning, I decided to talk to Mark again. I couldn't just stand by and watch our son suffer anymore. He needed help, and he wasn't getting it from the school or from us. I knew our conflict with Mark was only making things worse, but I had to convince him. "Mark," I said as we sat down for morning coffee, "we can't keep doing this. Have you seen how Tommy has changed? He's not the same child he was 2 years ago." "Lisa," Mark began, not lifting his eyes, "I know it hurts you to see this. It's hard for me too, but we can't always protect him." "It's not about protection," I snapped. "It's about the fact that he's suffering. Have you heard him cry at night? Have you ever looked into his eyes when he comes home? We're losing him, Mark. And if we don't do something, we'll lose him completely." Mark sighed and pushed his cup away. He looked at me as if he wanted to say something important, but couldn't find the words. "I just don't want him to think that he can always run away," he finally said. "We can't teach him to avoid problems. I want him to be strong, to stand up to this world that won't be kind to him. He's still a child." I answered, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "Tommy is only 10 years old. What kind of strength are you expecting from him? He's already going through things that even adults don't experience. Every day he faces a reality that's breaking him. If we don't help him now, he just won't survive." Mark was silent again. I didn't know if my words reached him. There was pain in his eyes, but there was something else, stubbornness, as if he still couldn't accept my point of view. We sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts, and I felt the chasm between us growing deeper. A few more days passed, and nothing changed. Tommy continued to suffer, and every time I brought up the topic of school, it only led to more arguments. Every time I tried to discuss something, Mark repeated the same things. "The world won't be kind to him. He has to learn to deal with difficulties." Those words drove me crazy. It seemed like Mark viewed everything through the lens of his own experiences and forgot that Tommy wasn't him. One evening, after I once again heard Tommy quietly crying in his room, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I made a decision. I would transfer him to another school, despite Mark's objections. I had to do it for our son, even if it destroyed our marriage. That night, after I decided to transfer Tommy to a new school, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Thoughts about how this might destroy my relationship with Mark kept me awake. But every tear of Tommy's, every silent ride around the house reminded me that I couldn't wait any longer. This was more than just a choice between schools. It was about saving our son from a pain he could no longer defend himself against. The next morning, I called the new school I had found a couple of weeks ago. I talked to the principal for a long time, explaining the situation. I liked how she listened, attentively, with understanding, without empty promises. She told me how the school was organized for children with disabilities, how they dealt with bullying, and how they created an environment where each student received attention. I felt that this was the place where Tommy could find peace and feel safe. I made up my mind. Without telling Mark, I completed all the necessary paperwork for the transfer. The principal helped expedite the process so Tommy could start school as soon as possible. This step wasn't easy for me. I knew hiding this from my husband was wrong, but I was even more afraid of his reaction. He was so firm in his belief that Tommy should stay at his current school that any new discussion could lead to an even more serious conflict. Every day, I noticed more and more how Tommy became withdrawn. His face, which used to be open and kind, now seemed like a mask. He tried not to show his emotions, as if he was afraid someone would once again see his weakness. I couldn't watch it any longer. The next day, I approached Tommy while he was sitting in the living room, holding his tablet. "Tommy, I want to talk to you," I began softly. He looked at me but said nothing. "I found a new school for you," I continued. "It's a little farther away, but you'll feel better there. They have good programs for kids like you. You'll be safe." His face didn't change, but I saw a flash of interest in his eyes. Maybe it was hope, that tiny spark I hadn't seen in so long. "Really?" His voice was quiet, as if he was afraid it was just a false promise. "Really?" I replied, feeling a lump of emotion rise in my throat. "There will be teachers who can help you, and kids who are also learning to live with challenges. You won't be alone." Tommy lowered his eyes, and I didn't know how he took my words. Maybe he was so crushed that he couldn't believe his suffering could end. But I decided not to wait any longer. Tommy deserved better, and if Mark didn't understand that, I was ready to take this step alone. A few days passed. Tommy was still quiet, but it seemed like the thought of a new school was gradually giving him some hope. He cried less at night, and I felt like I had made the right choice. There was only one thing left: how to tell Mark about it. I had been putting it off for a long time, but deep down, I knew I couldn't hide it any longer. When dinner time came, I decided it was the right moment. "Mark," I began as we sat down at the table, "I need to talk to you." He tore his gaze away from the TV and looked at me. His eyes already held suspicion, as if he knew in advance that the conversation would be hard. "I've decided to transfer Tommy to a new school," I said, trying to stay calm. "I've already done all the paperwork. He'll start there in a week." Mark froze. His face tensed, and I knew a storm was coming. Mark was silent, staring at me. I felt the tension in the room fill the space. A few seconds felt like an eternity. Finally, he stood up from the table, slowly and carefully pushing the chair back, as if trying to keep the emotions that were about to burst out in check. You've already transferred him." His voice was quiet, but there was not only hurt but also disappointment in it. I nodded, trying to keep it together. "Mark, I couldn't wait any longer. Tommy can't keep going to that school. Every day he withdraws further into himself. Do you see it? He's slipping away from us, and if we don't do something, we'll lose him." I couldn't let it go on any longer. He squinted, as if considering my words, but instead of understanding, his face grew even harsher. He turned sharply toward the window, crossing his arms over his chest. For a few minutes, he just stood there, saying nothing. "You did this behind my back," he finally said, still not turning to face me. "How could you, Lisa? He's our son, and you made this decision alone without me. I tried to talk to you. I couldn't hold back. I told you more than once that he's suffering. I begged you to listen, but every time, you refused to hear me." Mark turned to me, his eyes flashing with anger. "It's not that simple. Do you think changing schools will solve all his problems? You're just running away from difficulties. Tommy needs to learn to be strong, Lisa. You won't save him by hiding him from the world." Those words, which I had heard many times before, stabbed me again like a knife. I knew Mark didn't want anything bad for our son. He truly believed that the world was cruel and that Tommy needed to toughen up to survive in it. But he didn't see what I saw, how Tommy was gradually losing himself, sinking into loneliness and fear. "He's a child, Mark." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes but tried to hold them back. "Tommy is only 10 years old. He can't handle this alone. He needs a place where he'll be accepted as he is, where he'll feel safe. Don't you see that?" Mark sighed, running a hand over his face, and looked at me again with a mix of exhaustion and fury. "You're acting emotionally, Lisa. You're only thinking about how to make his life easier now, but what about later? You won't always be able to protect him from everything. You can't shield him from every bully, from every unpleasant word. The world won't change because you decided to hide him in another school. I don't want to hide him." I felt my emotions take over, my voice rising to a shout. "I just want him to be safe somewhere. He can't take this pressure anymore. And I can't keep watching him come home every day and cry. Even if it doesn't solve all his problems, it will at least give him some peace. Mark turned away from me, looking out the window again. At first, I thought he just didn't want to continue the conversation. But then he slowly said, "I can't believe you went behind my back." There was so much pain and disappointment in his voice that for a moment, I felt like a traitor. I knew I had done it for our son, but now looking at Mark, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family was falling apart. "It was a decision I had to make," I said more quietly. "I didn't want to do it without you, but I couldn't wait any longer." Mark was silent for a long time, and I didn't know what to expect next. There was clearly a struggle going on in his mind, between his convictions and what he felt as a father. I could see it. But despite everything, his next words hit me like a punch in the chest. "You think you won by transferring him to another school?" His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "We'll see what happens next. You'll bear the responsibility for this choice, not me." I understood that this wasn't the end of our conversation, but at that moment, all the words had already been said. After that conversation with Mark, silence filled the house. We no longer fought. There was no point. I had made my choice, and he had made his. Tommy transferred to the new school a week later, as planned, but the atmosphere at home didn't become any lighter. Mark and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was only short, superficial phrases, as if each of us was afraid to spark a new conflict. At first, Tommy seemed a little better. He started attending classes at the new school, where it seemed he was accepted with understanding. The teachers were attentive, other children with disabilities supported him, and for the first few days, he even smiled when I picked him up after school. I began to think that maybe I had made the right choice, despite everything that had happened between me and Mark. But soon the situation changed again. Tommy withdrew into himself even more than before. He no longer cried openly, but something unsettling settled in his eyes, a complete sense of despair and loneliness. He didn't want to talk about school, didn't tell me how his day had gone. Every time I asked him if everything was okay, he briefly answered yes, but I knew it wasn't true. One evening, after Tommy had already gone to bed, I heard him whispering something in the dark. I approached his room, quietly opening the door. Tommy was sitting on his bed, hugging his knees, quietly talking to himself. Why can't they just leave me alone? Why are they still laughing? I froze in place. So even at the new school, something had gone wrong. I wanted to go in, talk to him, but I knew that any words now would be meaningless. He had already sunk into that despair, and I didn't know how to pull him back out. I closed the door and returned to my room, feeling completely helpless. The next day, I tried talking to the teachers, but they insisted that they hadn't noticed anything serious. Yes, adjusting to the new school could take some time, but they were sure that Tommy would manage. However, I could see that he wasn't managing. He just couldn't find his place in this world. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mark was getting worse. We barely talked to each other, and when we did, it always ended in mutual accusations. Mark didn't hide the fact that he blamed me for what was happening. He didn't say it directly, but I saw the look in his eyes when he looked at Tommy, as if he wanted to say, "I told you so." Another month passed. Tommy shut down completely. He lost interest in school, refused to participate in any activities that used to bring him even a little joy. In the evenings, he sat in his room, staring into the void, and I could no longer reach him. One evening, I entered his room. He was sitting by the window, looking outside at the other children playing. I quietly sat down next to him. "Tommy," I began, trying to speak softly, "I know it's hard for you right now. I want to help you, but I need you to talk to me. Tell me what's going on." He was silent for a long time, not taking his eyes off the window. Then finally, he quietly said, "Mom, it doesn't matter. I'll never be like them. I'll always be different. And no one will ever accept me like this." Those words broke my heart. Tommy had always been a kind, bright boy, despite all the challenges he had faced. And now he was saying that he would never be a part of this world. I tried to comfort him, hugged him, but he didn't respond to my affection. He seemed frozen, lost in his own world of pain and loneliness. That evening, when I lay down to sleep, one thought kept running through my head: I had lost my son. Not physically, but emotionally. Despite all my efforts, despite my attempts to protect him, to help him find himself, I felt that he had left me for a world where I could no longer reach him. Mark silently watched what was happening, not interfering. He no longer argued, but he didn't support me either. Our family was slowly falling apart, and I realized that no school transfer could fix that. In the end, I sat in the living room, staring into the empty space, and realized that I had done everything I could, but it wasn't enough. I had lost not only my son but my husband as well. Tommy remained in his world of suffering, and I, in my world of guilt and helplessness. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If you were touched by Lisa's and her son's story, please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments. It's very important for us to know what you think about this story. Your feedback helps us create even deeper and more moving stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new stories. We're always happy to see you again.